Frampton versus Scott Quigg. Not a fight that kind of played out in a way that we'd expect it to. Not a fight that broke down in the way that many people thought that it would. Frampton wins, becomes the unified champion with a split decision, 116 to 112 in his favour on the scorecards of two judges. One of the judges did have it in Scott Quigg's favour, 115 to 113. And I do think this was a tough fight to score. You know, the early rounds, very little happened. The first six were very, very cagey. So even though consensus seems to be that Frampton was edging those rounds, you can see how there may have been some rounds where judges edged towards Quigg because so little happened that it could have gone really either way. The rounds that Quigg won towards the end of the fight were more dominant rounds for Quigg than the early rounds were for Frampton. So yeah, as a result, I can see why this did become a difficult fight to score. I'll give you my scorecard. I had the fight 115 to 114 in favour of Frampton, so I believe that the right man won. I scored the first round a draw, 10-10. For me, so little happened in that round. It was impossible to score in favour of either man. I then had Frampton winning rounds 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Very, very little happened in those rounds. They were low volume rounds, they were cagey, very nervous, very cautious boxing. But for me, Frampton effectively out-jabbed Scott Quigg and controlled the pace. He had the higher output, he was controlling the range, and it was probably that section of the fight that really saw him win this fight, because to be honest, I think it's hard to score a single round for Scott Quigg until the 7th round, and I've actually gone for Scott Quigg in the 7th round, although it's a swing round. It was a very, very tight round, the 7th, and whilst I've slightly leaned towards Scott Quigg, I acknowledge that round could go either way, and it may be one I'd have to rethink if I was able to watch the fight a second time. I've then scored Quigg 8, 9, 10 and 11 based on aggression and output, and I've gone Frampton in the 12th round. I thought Frampton won the 12th round clearly. So I've gone 115 to 114 in favour of Frampton. As I say, I've scored the first round a tie, 2 to 6 in favour of Frampton, 7 to 11 in favour of Quigg, and then 12 again to Frampton. But I wouldn't complain with a scorecard of 116 to 113, because I think there's a solid argument that you could score the 7th round to Frampton as well. It was a weird fight how it developed early on. You know, it was so cagey, and I was kind of thinking to myself, what on earth Scott Quigg was doing? You know, what was his game plan? Because he really wasn't using his advantages in this fight in the early part of the rounds. You know, he wasn't imposing his size, he wasn't imposing his strength, he wasn't bringing too much output, he wasn't banking good shots to the body. He was literally standing at range, playing a jabbing chess match with Frampton, and we all thought that from the outside Frampton would be the superior jabber, and that proved to be the case. You know, that really did prove to be the case. Frampton was landing snappier, fast jabs, scoring shots, and was, you know, really winning the early rounds for my money. You know, Scott Quigg, for me, had a bit of trouble in the early rounds judging the range. You know, he was constantly throwing punches that were out of range, that in turn led him to becoming slightly inaccurate. I thought Frampton was doing quite a good job of judging the range. You know, he was able to move outside, take a step back, evade Scott Quigg's punches whenever Scott Quigg was throwing. And I thought Frampton was doing a good job of controlling the pace. You know, he was steering clear of most of Scott Quigg's work and dominating behind the jab. And I just really wasn't sure what Scott Quigg's game plan was. He threw this fight away in rounds 2 to 6 by just not doing anything and not really giving himself a chance to win these rounds. You know, not using his advantages whatsoever. I thought the corner work from Joe Gallagher was pretty baffling at times, pretty baffling. I've actually made a note. At the end of round 6, I believe I heard Joe Gallagher say to Scott Quigg, don't be taking too many chances, Scott. You know, in other words, he was, you know, at the end of round 2, I heard him saying to Scott Quigg he was boxing well. At the end of round 6, he's telling Quigg not to take too many chances. You know, for me, at the end of round 3, at the end of round 4, I'd be wanting Gallagher to be saying to Quigg, right, this isn't working. Let's adapt. Let's do something different. Let's try and close the reins. Let's try and get some bodywork going. You know, I don't know what Joe Gallagher was doing with that advice, telling Quigg not to be taking any chances. You know, and at the end of round 8, Gallagher tells Scott Quigg, you know, Sky had you 6-1 down after 7. I think we're badly down in this fight. And Scott Quigg looks amazed. You know, clearly this is the first time in the fight that it's even crossed his mind that he's badly down on the scorecards. And I really don't know what Gallagher was doing. I mean, it was pretty obvious that the game plan wasn't working and that Quigg was not effectively scoring and winning rounds. So I don't know how it was left to round 8 to communicate this, and still after round 6 Quigg was being told not to take risks. You know, for me, it would be reasonable to suggest that that could have cost Scott Quigg this fight, because straight away Scott Quigg starts putting his foot on the gas at that point and instantly starts picking up rounds in good fashion. You know, I just think the communication really wasn't there in the corner, and I think Gallagher allowed Quigg to be too safety first. I think it was really poor corner work, really poor corner work. In round 9, you can actually see mid-round Eddie Hearn waving Quigg on, you know, come on. He then goes over to Joe Gallagher and has a word with Joe Gallagher in the corner. He's obviously telling Gallagher, like, look, Quigg's badly behind on the scorecards here. Let's push the pace, you know, let's get things moving. And Quigg then rallies really well. You know, he's landing power punches on Frampton. He's starting to bully Frampton a bit. He's starting to big man Carl Frampton, push him around the ring. He starts landing eye-catching shots to the body, doubling up a bit. And for me, Quigg looked like he was on the verge of turning things round, but it was too little, too late. You know, Quigg was 5 rounds down after 6 on my scorecard. It was too little, too late, and Quigg threw a lot of stuff into it, rounds 10 and 11. Frampton showed great recuperative powers to stay into the fight, and Frampton showed his heart, his fitness and his skill by coming on to dominate the 12th round. So Frampton, definite deserved winner in this fight. He proved to be the superior boxer. He proved to have the superior game plan. He was the higher output fighter for longer periods of the fight. He boxed smart, he landed nice punches. But I can't help leaving this fight thinking that this is a fight that Scott Quigg should have won. You know, let's face it, one of the judges scored it to Scott Quigg by 2 rounds. I had Carl Frampton winning by just 1 round. This was a real close fight. And Scott Quigg just gave away large portions of the fight through ridiculous tactics. I mean, it was clear that the one thing Scott Quigg could not afford to do in this fight was try and beat Carl Frampton in a battle of the jabs. You know, halfway through this fight, it was Carl Frampton who was the better body puncher. It was Carl Frampton who was pushing the pace. It was Carl Frampton with the higher output. I mean, surely it needed to be Scott Quigg moving forward. It needed to be Scott Quigg getting up close. It needed to be Scott Quigg landing shots to the body. I don't know what he was doing. I don't know what the tactics were. I don't know why Joe Gallagher wasn't telling him to push the pace earlier on. You know, why did he leave it till round 8 to tell him he was badly behind? Why was he still telling him not to take risks at round 6? You know, for me it was real poor tactics that probably did cost Scott Quigg the fight. Because once Scott Quigg did put the pedal to the metal, he started to win rounds quickly. Now don't get me wrong, some of the things Frampton was doing there were very advanced. You know, Frampton's jab was very nice. Frampton's movement was very good. His back foot game, his ability to move in and out of range, you know, with his footwork. that did put Quigg off balance. You know, that did stop Quigg from imposing himself. So it's not purely Scott Quigg's ineptitude here. It's also credit to Carl Frampton for being such a sophisticated boxer. But I really do think that Quigg was being effective when he finally did start pushing the pace. And I don't think Frampton was liking it in there around 10 and 11. He was taking hard shots. Quigg was bullying him a bit, really, and landing the more eye-catching shots of the fight. So I kind of leave this fight with as many questions as I have answers. Yes, Carl Frampton is the better jawer from range, but we already knew that. What I don't get is why Scott Quigg just fought a fight that was so obviously tactically flawed. I mean, credit to Carl Frampton. You know, it's probably linked to Frampton's good performance that Quigg was not able to implement his supposed game plan. But, you know, really cannot understand what Scott Quigg and Joe Gallagher were doing in there. I've scored the fight to Carl Frampton. It wasn't the most entertaining fight for the most part, but at this point the rematch does make sense, surely. You know, the fight caught fire at the end, and I think there'll be a lot of people like me out there who do believe Scott Quigg could have won this fight. Let me know your thoughts. If you've enjoyed this, click the thumbs up button. Please hit the subscribe to the channel. I'm a bit confused. I don't really understand how the fight went this way. A bizarre fight for me. Frampton, a worthy winner, showed real class in there. But Scott Quigg could have, should have, but didn't. Let me know your thoughts. Many thanks for watching.